So in a previous video, this is the Marlow tin I mentioned. G'day all, my name's Rachel, aka Crazy Bones, and welcome to my channel. Continuing on from my last video, in this video, I go through doing the portal, the monster, and the character in the foreground, as well as bits and bobs in the background. So the colours that I used was raw sienna, which was to paint the main character in the foreground, the archway, and the torches. The colours that I painted the monster as well as the portal. So I painted the portal bright violet and the monster, sadly to say, hooker's green. I will not be referring to that colour again, just so you know. I have added in the reference image of what I painted digitally years ago. So I was still doing the same technique where I was using the acrylic paints but watered down. You'll probably see me touching my finger to the canvas. That's because it was really watered down to the point where I had to work as fast as possible so that way it wasn't spreading all over the canvas. So the same technique is what I was using in the last video, watering it down, separating the zones based by colour. The only areas that I did not paint were I'd say like air slots, so the things that I didn't paint would have been similar to like what we have in today's currency, which are air vents. There's about 3 of them on screen. One's really far away, and one's up close, and one's up towards the city more. So those are the only things that I left blank during the whole watered acrylic experience, I guess. Because for me, it was the first time I've ever done it. Because there's not much for me to add onto what I've already added in the previous video, for you lot to know what I'm doing, I'm just going to let this play through normally and speak to where I need to actually speak, and we'll go from there. It took me 2 days to fully water down and paint onto the canvas. Not so much doing the watering down part of the acrylic, but actually applying it to the canvas and letting it dry. Luckily, I have a fan in the room that I use that allows me to just hook it on and, allow the watered down acrylic to dry off quicker. I would use a hairdryer, but it's no point if I've got a fan in the room, so I just whack the fan on for about an hour or so and allow it to dry this way. Having a fan to help make the process a little bit quicker for me is a good idea, because acrylic does take a while to dry, especially when watered down, or in my instance where the watercolor down acrylic was drying too fast. In this case, on day 2, the watercolor was not drying quick enough because of it being a bit colder, because we had a colder day. I had to actually put the fan on and speed up the process of drying so then I could continue doing my painting process. As you can see, I was using raw sienna to paint the character. Now when I did this in a way that's similar to oil paints, so I painted the whole character in one colour instead of multiple, because of the way I think I visualised her in my head is the way I want to portray her on the canvas. So in the left hand corner is a digital art piece that I did years ago. I am going to stick to how her dress was done. However, the techniques that I used for the digital will be different for the painting. With the techniques that I'd be using for the painting, I will show you the process that I use and go through them with you, so that way you can all learn my techniques. As here, I've just noticed I've missed 2 zones that were meant to be the green that I used for the monster. So I'm just filling them in and sorting how it should be looking. And then I continue on with painting the rest of the raw sienna in areas that I needed it. Might not have been perfect when I put it down on the brush or onto the canvas, but that's okay because they will be different when I paint them in the future. In the future, you may notice me wearing headphones. That's because I'm listening to music instead of playing it out loud. Helps me relax whilst I'm doing the paintings, in case any of you wanted to know. In deciding what colour to paint the back room, like the far one in the back corner, that's in the right far off in the distance, I decided to paint that room black because when my brain thought of the sewage system, it has to come to a point where it drops down for it to be evacuated out of the area. That's what I did. So the room is pretty much pitch black. You can't see a thing. And so there's a reasonable idea behind it so that the sewer system goes down, so it drops off completely, and there's no light in that room. Why have torches so far back? So I just eliminated that idea out of my head and just painted that far room black. Like you can't see past the doorway leading into that room. When I was painting the new layer of grey down, I was also trying to keep the lines showing so I knew exactly where all the edges of the building would be. Yes, I do realise that Zeus has taken a poop on me just in the middle of the video because I wanted to get what I needed to out the way. I wasn't really fussed that he had taken a poop on me. I know. And so I left it until I was finished to clean up his mess. I did 3 layers of grey in order to make sure that the background did not show through as heavy or at all. So in this portion of the video, I'm pretty much going through fixing up areas that I've missed or are seeping through and making sure that everything is touching the line work. As I will go through it in another video, the areas that are around the archway will be a little bit different. So I've painted the area of grey close as possible because I'll be taking that out just a bit when I paint them down. So the areas that I've repainted were the spots that I could visually see were popping through and that needed to be changed over. So I was going as close as to all the lines as possible where I had to paint the grey on the foreground walls and the background walls. I was just touching them up so that way I could change it over what I needed to down the track. I was just touching up bits and pieces where I painted over it and I didn't really spot the paint. I'm also painting the top of the canvas, the edges, really. So that way there's no white seeping through besides the areas that are currently on the canvas. In this portion of the video, I cut off some tape and used it to create the lines that will create the edges to separate the walls from each other, as well as the ceiling in the background. So I'm just going through with some black paint and creating those edges for the corners. I used the same tape in the foreground twice, but I had to use a new lot in the background because some of the tape had paint on it, and I did not want that to get onto the paint in the background, especially the grey. So I cut up some of that fresh tape and used fresh tape in that area. I also watered down the black and added so there was more of a shadow effect going into the corners of the painting. I did this in all the areas, but I didn't do the background until later, which will be in a newer clip really of me shadowing in those areas, making it like it comes to a darker point so it shadows into the corner where the light doesn't touch. You'll notice in this portion of the video, and I duly apologise for moving the camera, it was not in the best spot at the time of doing this portion. When I was doing the lines of shadow that represent where all the points come to for the shadow in the walls, I had to fix up areas where it wasn't arching. So this would be the archway from one wall to the other wall. So from the left to right portion, where it's not the arches that come to where the air vent is, it's the arches that are evenly going from one side of the wall to the other. I made a mistake during that portion. Instead of being even, it wasn't, and it wasn't sitting correctly, so I was staring at it for a while, and I had to fix that up before continuing. In this portion of the video, I watered down some darker grey and washed it over the top of the grey that was already there. So it's pretty much watered down, so it would be darker than the foreground walls because that area has no lights on as much as what it would be in the foreground, darkening the back room a little bit so you can tell it's further in the distance a bit more rather than up close to your face. In this portion of the video, I put black and white on my palette and was dipping my palette knife into both black and white, making a similar grey to what I already had on the canvas already, but also adding texture. So I was applying it down and then up, as you can see on screen. So I was dipping it in two colours, making a third colour, but dipping it in all three and applying it to the canvas and sliding my thumb up. So that way I could create texture where it was not exactly finished in the scene. So it would give it more depth to the area. You'll notice the end of the video ended up being cut short. This is due to the fact that the camera ended up being full and it turned itself off. So I'm sorry if the ending of the portion of the video, when you see the next lot, has been cut short due to the fact that it switched itself off on me and told me that the card was full. So I dearly apologise that I can catch the whole way how I did the effects. The beginning of the video does show you. Please subscribe, share, and like. Thank you.